several things in one, and there should be a program for each specific thing that you have to deal with your vehicle. You can't combine them. You can't combine them. It just doesn't work. And it's true that sometimes when you're, let's say that something strikes you and you say a program, it doesn't mean that it's wrong if you want to add to it at that time related programs. I mean, if it feels good to you to add related programs that seem to be pertinent to the one that is triggered, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But your list has to be clearly broken down to each specific area that you would send a program for. Now, your brain works better if the more repetitious the program and the shorter the program and the less programs you add to it. For example, if I'm dealing with a specific problem and it triggers several other programs, the fewer programs I program at that time, the better off I am. And the more I program the pertinent one, the better off I am. You all understand that? So I hope I'm getting the point across that you want the list to read quotes of what you would be saying to your vehicle at the moment that some weakness or a characteristic of the vehicle is showing its face. Okay?
It's also good. You read the one where someone wrote something about taking their teachers in the wrong way. What was that?
Oh, yes.
Which isn't...
program said, when dealing with lack of respect for my teachers, and maybe that's not the exact words, but this was telling what, when dealing with lack of respect from teachers, the program would be thus and so. And it's really hard for your teachers to understand why you're still in the class if you don't respect your teachers, and or if you haven't even shut up the vehicle totally any time it would have a lack of respect, because you've proven over and over and over to that vehicle the fact that you respect what we say, or you wouldn't be doing what we have taught you. Do you see what we're saying? So if the vehicle still is having a chance to mouth a lack of respect, it is in that area, it is very tardy. Because and that would make you go backwards several giant steps if a program of that sort is still necessary. Do you follow what we're saying? Now, this isn't to discourage you. This is to say that eventually you've got to learn that as fast as we're trying to move this class, that a certain way of looking at things has to become obsolete for your sake. I mean, you've got to, certain areas that, such as respect for your teachers, I can understand you're having to deal with that the first 2 or 3 years you were with us. Or maybe, I can't really, but I can say maybe I can, but I can understand you're dealing with that the first year. I really can. I can understand a little bit, maybe past that, but I can't understand this many years, because it means you didn't do any homework in that program, in that area, all the time, the times that came to you, or that would have been wiped out, because you don't. That is not something that is characteristic of your vehicle to doubt us.
In other words,
you see what I'm saying? That is not a characteristic of your vehicle. Excuse me. I mean, I can't see that it's really a characteristic of that vehicle to doubt us, because that vehicle has no capacity to see it. But it's an area that I can understand the vehicle questioning the fact that, you know, the kind of teachers you have and the fact that you are who you are and that we are who we are, I can understand you're having to make that adjustment at those phases where we were awakening to that understanding and having to do some significant programming to make that adjustment. But it's not really a weakness of the vehicle to have those. It was just, it's true that you were programmed to trust only yourself and to not look to anyone else. Maybe and maybe some of the religious-minded were even really afraid of someone leading them down the path to Satan instead of the path to God. I'm just talking the programming that you might have had to deal with.
Let me ask something,
Okay.
because in other words, that was one of the first things that you should have learned. And by now, what you're putting in the ether shouldn't be bad. You see what
Yeah.
we're saying? In other words, trust what teacher? Trust any teacher if you're putting that in the ether? You see what we're saying? Or have respect for your teacher. Why would you need to put that into the ether?
Because it can't apply to them out
it can't
there.
apply to them at all.
It can't apply to them. In other words, the reason we are now given the instruction to have you put these programs in ether is, I think that those who gave us this instruction have taken for granted that we would be beyond that kind of thing
By now. Yeah.
by now, and that the kind of programming you would be working on would be appropriate to any who could pick up on it.
So in a sense, it's awfully, it's something that you shouldn't even allow to go through your mind right now.
Right. It was unique to when you were an audit before taking the course for credit. Do you understand what I'm talking about? That kind of thought was appropriate for you when you were auditing and weren't taking for credit. Do you understand that? Okay. A person goes to college and he doesn't want to have to do all the homework, and he can pay a much lesser fee and sit in a class as an audit, and he doesn't get any credit for the course, and he doesn't have to do any homework. He can just show up and listen to the lectures. Now, in a sense, when you were first with the class, all of you were auditing. You were trying to decide whether or not to pay the price to take the course for credit, right? I mean, that's where your vehicles were at the time. Do you follow what we're saying? But once you went through the tuition line and paid your fee, you were no longer in audit status. That makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you. And you've all paid your fees. You've paid whopping fees in labor and effort to, in other words, the courses that you have participated in, they were valuable to you, or you would not have worked so hard. Can you understand that? Okay. I didn't want to get
So anyway, that should be gotten rid of.
That's right.
Pronto and not put on your list.
Okay, I'll turn this off for a moment, and then if we have some questions pertinent to this.
And we definitely want you all working on these folks, you know, being satisfied being a spoke, and so that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you.
Yes, that was still on.
But that was on the
still on a
website,
couple of.
Still on some.
On some we just got this morning, so they must not have heard the tape. So
No, it
still
just
on
went
some.
back yesterday.
You all see how that was really twisted backwards? Okay. Now let's see if you have anything, questions about this new step or anything else.
A lot of them know how to apply for a job, you know, but this.
We've been talking for a few minutes about how important it is that now that you're going to be looking at some task possibilities in Houston. You have one advantage in that most of you who are looking for tasks are coming from a task, and you're not without a job. and that is an advantage to you. But it's also very important to sharpen up the characteristics that make an employer want to hire you. And that is to appear vital and quick and mentally alert and with a good, pleasant countenance and alive and eager to learn, even if you're applying in areas that you don't have any background or experience or education. That there are a lot of people, believe it or not, who even today would rather have someone who isn't a know-it-all in the area they're hiring from, and would just as soon teach them almost from scratch if they like the individual. And so there your test is to present yourself in a way that they would find in what they see the kind of individual they would really like to have working for them, and be willing to overlook the fact they'd rather have some experience also.
In other words, if you go to apply for a typing job, you don't want to say, oh, I type 40 words a minute.
Not kind of
mistake. But you want to say, well, right now I do 40 words per minute, but I'm improving each day.
Just using that as an example.
In other words, you want to look at it as a positive, not as a negative. I've done some work on home computers or microcomputers, because Apple isn't just a home computer. It's a microcomputer. You've done work on word processing. You know how it works. I've worked a little bit on it. I know how to operate it, and I'm not as good as I want to be, but I'm improving each day. And you want to take everything as a positive, not as, well, I'm afraid, I know a little bit about it, but not too much. I don't have too much experience with it, because immediately it's just like, oh well, you know, I don't even want to fool with somebody. I have to teach from scratch. They want somebody to step in who can learn on their own, and you want to give the impression that you can learn on your own, and willing to push. You're pushing yourself in order to improve, and this is how you want to feel. And this is what we want you to really feel, because whenever you come to a garden and you have to do something like that, you've got to rev your own self up with what you have. You may not have a teacher. You might have maybe half a dozen of you will come to a garden, and 3 of you will go out to get a job to take care of yourself, and the other 3 will set up the lab and take care of the other things for the in-craft things. And the 3 of you who are going out might not know a thing about that garden, other than you have to go out and observe what kinds of things they do, and you see something that looks like a computer. You've had some experience with the computer, so you look at it and you try to delve into it, so you think that you know enough about it that you can handle it. So you go and apply for that at that place and say, I know a little bit about this thingamabob here, but you don't call it a computer because it may not be a computer here. You may have a thingamabob as you say. So you call it whatever they're calling it, and you go in there and you say, I don't know, I know how it works, and I'm learning it. And I've done pretty good about learning in the past, and I want to learn it. And in a sense, you sell yourself. And they give you a job, and of course your next step would be to really get in there and learn all that you can. And then you have your foot in the door, you have your things that you need taken care of. And then the next step would be the other 2 individuals to get something. So this is how you're really learning how to do these things. Not just to sustain everybody in the craft, but to know how to handle things whenever you are given a task on another garden like this. And believe it or not, you will have to take.
Now you'll find people in Texas who sometimes are geared, if they're ready to hire someone for an area that they don't maybe need much experience in. A lot of times they'll set their wage way down, thinking that they might be willing to get some illegal alien or someone in who will take bottom wages. And so they may be geared at times to think in terms of just the minimum wage or right next to it. But even if you have no experience, if you're coming across the way Keith's talking about and selling yourself, it's quite obvious that you're not fitting in that category that is willing to take minimum wage or as just some to ride on the back of a pickup truck with McAllen or Brownsville and willing to take anything. You know what we're saying? And a lot of times they will like you and think, boy, this is a jewel, but then when it gets to the money, they're still geared to think, oh, I hope I can get them for what I might have been willing to take someone for who can't even speak the language and doesn't even know how to act in the community. Do you see what we're saying? But and then if they come up to you with some fee like that, say, well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to look for something considerably better than that. And frequently they will come around and say, oh, well, I knew that to begin with, but I had to try because I was trying to keep my budget down, and I was going to be willing to take someone who might fit that salary. But now that I found you, I would rather pay twice that. You see what I'm saying? You've got to know this, that this all might be passing through their mind. And a lot of times they'll try you out at some ridiculous fee just to see how you'll respond, because they'll take whatever chance they can to not have to spend that much money. But don't be afraid to immediately speak to them that that's not something you could live with at all. And if that's what they're looking for, you wish them luck, but you'll have to look elsewhere. A lot of times they'll turn right around and say, well, I tried, but you're really what I want. And what will it take to get you? Do you follow what we're saying? And you can't really blame them for trying. It's just like if you go out and try to sell your used car, you're going to ask twice what it's really worth, because you see it a lot prettier than the guy who comes along to see it as a used car. And so you'll try to get a better price for it. No, that's the way they do. And then you realize, oh, I can't really expect to get that. You follow that?
Also, think something higher. In other words, like Sariyoti mentioned, try to have in mind what you'd like to do. Because there are a lot of businesses in the Houston area, and nice places like oil companies and well, just all kinds of things that you could go in. They may not even run an ad in the paper.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, you
might
just find a place and just go in and go to personnel and find out if they have any openings for receptionists or computer operators or typists or whatever it is that you feel like you're qualified to do. And but don't stick strictly to the newspapers.
That's right.
And
keep your eyes open. Like as you move around and as you see things, you might get a notion that you want to try a certain place, that it might catch your eye, and there might be something that would open there. A lot of these places, like Keith said, they won't advertise. And like some of them may use an employment agency to hire from, but that doesn't mean they won't accept somebody who comes in off the street. They don't necessarily have a contract with that agency, that they only take employees through that agency.
So think highly of yourself. Now don't tell a bunch of lies about yourself.
Now don't elevate
don't
yourself.
Build yourself up
looks
in the
ridiculous.
wrong way that have
Be
all
sure
kinds
you
of
can,
degrees.
that's what you say you can
Right.
do.
But just don't feel badly about what you think you can't do. Dwell on the things that you can do, even though you're just beginning to learn them. At least you know them. That's more than what some people can do. One good thing about you, all of you have a very good counselor. And you're clean cut, you're neat, and you have a very pleasant disposition. And people notice those things about you. And it isn't like these ruddy people with long hair and long beards and dirty clothes that go in to apply for a job at a oil company and want to sit in and act as a receptionist. You know, I said long beard, but it's just like we told you how we saw on television these guys that were looking for a job, and they looked off. They couldn't find one, but they looked so bad that no one wanted to hire them. So if they had cleaned themselves up, they probably could have gotten a job. So you have a 50% of your taken care of just by being yourself.
Right. Remember we told you about this one agency and employment agency in Tucson that put great big full-length mirrors all over the place that with a sign down at the bottom that said, "Would you hire this person?"
So it's the main thing is just to think high. And even if you go to try to apply for president of the company, there's nothing wrong in that.
Don't get mad, dude. Don't forget that the name that you are using in this class is the name that we have assigned to the mind. Okay? And therefore, nobody who has an OD on their name can do anything wrong. It's only when that tool that had another name gets in the way of that performance that there's trouble.
In the vehicle.
When the vehicle gets in the way, then there's trouble. Now, it doesn't even hurt for you to go a step further in changing your well, let me back up a second. We said that as you send out these programs on your task list, that it should help humans begin to get the picture that their minds control or can learn to control their vehicles, that their minds are something different and something separate. And they need to learn that. Now, it wouldn't even hurt you as you see a human. Instead of saying, "Boy, that girl sure has a such and or that girl sure is flirtatious," would be a fallacy for you to say. If you said that poor person sure is having to deal with a flirtatious characteristic vehicle. In other words, if you would start, as you see individuals, try to think of what that poor mind has to deal with that vehicle. Now, it's true that it's a young mind, not to be compared with yours. It's a young mind, but it can grow so much faster if it separated its mind from the house that it's in. It can get controlled so much faster, even though it's a young mind. But once that mind can really come to life, once it begins to have some control of the vehicle. Okay? Do you understand that? So as you see humans, think of what that individual is having to deal with by what you see in the characteristic of the vehicle. But don't think of that person as that vehicle. Okay? That should help you and help them. So,
We're not talking about this side of it.
no.
We're talking about man.
You know, it's funny that I heard this preacher comment on TV. I was reading from Leviticus, I think. It said something about that the life of the soul is in the blood. And this was thousands of years ago that these things were being said. And can you see what that means? Can you see that the life of the soul is the genes, and as the blood is passed on, that's where how the soul exists. Well, you want to say something more? Okay. Thing is that there's a possibility that Lynx may go ahead and try to locate some quarters for us in the Houston area. Which, in other words, as you think about, if you make a phone call or you make some flying, keep in mind that we may have a setup where you can do some job hunting on somewhat of a retreat schedule, like maybe instead of coming here, you would go there and do it. Instead of how we said earlier that we would just send a carload down as the carload had a point up.